This isn't just another story about World War II. Not really. It's the story of a colossal strategic blunder, an error in judgment so deeply rooted in ideology that it blinded an entire empire to a revolution that was happening right out in the open. This is about how a nation's core beliefs became its greatest vulnerability. So let's dive into how this fatal miscalculation actually unfolded. Okay, I want you to picture it. It's December 1940. The German high command feels unstoppable. They're looking at meticulous intelligence reports. The data is accurate, and their conclusion seems absolutely ironclad. They look across the Atlantic, and what do they see? A nation that is completely, utterly unprepared for total war. And when they see America's plan to use women in factories, well, they don't see a hidden strength. They see a fatal weakness. That single assessment, right there on that piece of paper, would turn out to be one of the most catastrophic miscalculations in all of modern history. So the big question is, how could they get it so profoundly wrong? I mean, these were not stupid people. To understand their mistake, we have to try to see the world through their eyes, using the exact same data they had in front of them. Let's break down the flawed blueprint they used to size up America. Now, this is what's so fascinating. If you look at the column on the left, the German assessment was technically correct. American factories were busy making cars and refrigerators. The workforce was largely inexperienced in war production. And yeah, the U.S. Army was tiny, ranked 17th in the world, smaller than Romania's at the time. But here's the critical error, the one that changed everything. They analyzed a static snapshot. They mistook what was happening in that moment for a permanent reality. They saw the what is, but were completely blind to the what could be. They saw women entering factories as a sign of pure desperation, not as the revolutionary force they were about to become. And here are the hard numbers that made them so confident. I mean, look at this. In 1940, America's entire military output was basically a rounding error. From their perspective, a heavily militarized, state-controlled society, the idea that a nation obsessed with consumer goods could just pivot to war production on a dime, it was simply unimaginable. The math seemed so simple, so clear, but their entire calculation was missing the most important variable, the human one. And then, on December 7th, 1941, everything changed. The attack on Pearl Harbor was meant to cripple America, to take it off the board. Instead, it did the one thing Germany's planners never, ever anticipated. It awakened a sleeping giant and unleashed an industrial and social revolution on a scale the world had never seen before. But here's a crucial detail. The revolution didn't really start on December 7th. Look closely at this timeline. The seeds were already there. As early as September 1940, more than a year before Pearl Harbor, women, on their own initiative, were signing up for welding classes and learning to read blueprints. This is a detail the German planners completely missed. They saw a government, they saw an army, but they didn't see the will of the people, a force that was already starting to mobilize itself, from the ground up. Then, after Pearl Harbor, the floodgates just burst open. So when the U.S. announced its first big production goal, 60,000 aircraft for 1942 alone, German analysts literally laughed it off. They called it propaganda. I mean, think about it. Their entire nation, after years of intense rearmament, was making just over 12,000 planes a year. To them, the American numbers weren't a serious plan. They were an absurdity, mathematically impossible. They couldn't have been more wrong. So, how in the world did America achieve the impossible? Well, it wasn't magic. It was a revolution in thinking, a secret weapon in industrial engineering that the German planners, who were locked in a very traditional, craft-based mindset, just couldn't wrap their heads around. This right here, this is the key to the whole thing. The best way to think about it is like a modern fast food kitchen, right? No single person needs to know how to make everything on the menu. Each person just masters one station, the grill, the fryer, whatever. And together, they produce meals at an incredible speed. America applied that exact same principle to building bombers. So instead of needing one expert craftsman to build an entire engine, you train one person to do one simple task perfectly. Then you combine hundreds of these simple tasks, and suddenly you can build the most complex machines on Earth with a workforce that had zero experience just a few weeks earlier. And this chart just brilliantly shows the result. It's staggering. This is where that iconic image of Rosie the Riveter really comes from. It wasn't just a poster. It was based on real women, like Rose Monroe, who was part of a team at the Willow Run plant in Michigan. Her team could build a whole bomber fuselage section in just 45 minutes. That exact same job in a top-tier German factory done by experienced craftsmen took 8 hours. The efficiency gains weren't just big, they were astronomical. Just let that sink in for a second. A massive, 4-engine heavy bomber, rolling off the assembly line every 63 minutes. This wasn't just a factory anymore. It was a torrent of air power, a constant stream of machinery, a symbol of an industrial might that the enemy had dismissed as pure fantasy. Now let's move on to the people at the very heart of this story, because their success wasn't just an industrial achievement, it became a direct assault on the enemy's core beliefs. This is where the war of production becomes a war of ideas. Nazi ideology was incredibly rigid on this point. A woman's place was in the home, raising children for the state. The idea of them building advanced weaponry was seen as a sign of societal decay, of weakness. And yet, here was the reality. 65% of the entire American aircraft workforce was female. They were welders, electricians, riveters. They were literally building submarines. So while one regime was actively suppressing the potential of half its population, the other was unleashing it as its single greatest strategic asset. And nowhere was this more critical than in the Battle of the Atlantic. German U-boats were strangling Great Britain. The Allies' only hope was to build cargo ships, these Liberty ships, faster than they could be sunk. It seemed like an impossible task. But by applying these new assembly line methods to shipbuilding, American shipyards started launching 3 ships a day. They won the Battle of the Atlantic not at sea, but in the shipyards of California and Maine, thousands of miles away. And this is the crucial point, right? The work done in those factories by those women directly translated to dominance on the battlefield. But hey, you don't have to take my word for it. Just listen to German Field Marshal Kesselring himself. When you're facing an enemy that can replace every single tank you destroy with 3 more, battlefield tactics start to matter a whole lot less. The sheer weight of material becomes overwhelming. By 1944, the war wasn't really a question of strategy anymore. It had become a problem of simple, brutal arithmetic. Just look at these numbers. For every single one of Germany's legendary feared Tiger tanks, America produced over 36 Shermans. They produced more than double the aircraft. The war of production had been decisively, completely lost. And with it, the war itself. So what can we take away from this incredible story? What's the lasting lesson? Well, the impact of this miscalculation and the industrial and social revolution it sparked, it changed the world forever. The final numbers are just staggering. Let's just pause on this for a moment. This is what the arsenal of democracy, powered in large part by a workforce that was dismissed as a weakness, actually produced. It was an avalanche of steel and aluminum that buried the Axis powers, a level of industrial output that just a few years earlier was considered pure fantasy. And that really brings us to the ultimate lesson of this whole story. The fatal miscalculation wasn't about underestimating factory capacity. It wasn't about resources. It was, at its core, a failure of imagination. It was an ideological blindness that made it impossible for them to see human potential, to understand that a free, motivated, and fully mobilized society, one that uses all of its talent, could achieve things that coercion and rigid doctrine never, ever could. And that leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? Their flawed assumptions were about gender roles and industrial models. What are ours? It's a powerful lesson from history that really challenges us to look beyond our own assumptions, our own biases, and ask ourselves, what incredible, unseen potential are we leaving on the table right now just because we can't imagine it?